Good afternoon, class, and welcome to our professional development on class and socioeconomic status. My name is Christopher Wickstrom, and these are my colleagues.
Molly Jordan,
Krista Shabo,
Allison Saley.
Before we get started today, I would like everybody in the room to reach in their wallet and pick up the first thing money related. It could be a $20 bill, a $100 bill, a dime, a nickel, even a penny. Once you do that, hold it up in the air as high as you can for the rest of the class to see, including myself. See the variety we have in the room? That is a lot like our socioeconomic status today in our country. Some people have nothing, some people have everything, and some people are in the middle. Our mission today is to discuss these objectives. Define socioeconomic status, provide information on how systems of privilege maintain social class inequalities, and implement strategies for learning and teaching. Before we get started with the bulk of our presentation, our very own Molly Jordan would like to share a little bit about our topic through her personal experiences.
So as you'll see, I passed out to you guys a little survey, and the survey is really kind of I want you to think about the students you have in your classroom, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret that not many people know about. So this is called the unknown, and it's just a little food for thought. So I was privileged as a daughter, only child of two parents who were married for many years, and they were both professionals, and we were considered a middle-class working family. We were homeowners, and my parents always gave like a lot of donations and everything to a lot of other people. We were always in the know and in the go and everything, but we had a strong foundation in church. But the main thing that I really want to stress is that everything can change in an instant. And what I mean by that is, when I was 16, my parents got a divorce. And because of that divorce, my mother and I ended up in a situation that we would call now situational poverty. We ended up at one time, we didn't even have food in our pantry. Now, you can imagine being a professional and not being able to even provide food for your one child and for you to consume. We even had a can of SpaghettiOs, and we weren't even able to eat that. I would not eat because my mother had had a heart attack, and she needed to take her heart medicine. We ended up in a displaced living situation. We faced homelessness. And had it not been for the coaches and the teachers who knew about my situation, it would have been really, really bad. And what I mean by that is, at one time I was, sleeping in my car, and my coach found out about it. And I told him, I just don't want anybody to know. And I was just very adamant that I did not want anyone to know what I was living through. Because here I was, a senior and top of my class, and it was embarrassing, and it wasn't something I had asked for. And so Coach Rob put a sign on the door that said that the locker room was being painted, and that's where I slept. And here I was, a senior, college scholarships and things in hand, but the main thing is he had compassion for my situation, and that was just huge for me. And we were struggling every day to make our needs be met. And like I said, my coach took me in, and I had teachers who saw about me every day. Miss Burgess was my business teacher, and she always made sure I had a snack for break. She had my own little snack room. And no one knew I had a little shoebox in there that she would keep snacks in. We put it in a Nike shoebox so no one would know. The lunchroom workers, Granny Marbet, that's what everyone called her. She always made sure I had extra food on my plate. And when she could, she would sneak me like a little to-go box so I would have something to eat between practices. The principal, he called me into his office, Coach Serafini, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna take care of all of your financial obligations for your senior year. You don't worry about it. And Miss Howard, the counselor, she made sure I got every scholarship I could possibly apply for. And she pushed me to make sure my essays were perfect. And Miss Lancaster and Miss Kelly would always check over. So you can see it took a network of teachers and faculty to work together to make me successful. But they also held me accountable. And so here I am, 37 years old. I've been teaching in education for 14 years. And every single one of those teachers and coaches I named off, I'm friends with on Facebook. I see them face to face. I have their cell phone numbers now. And they're still holding me accountable. You know, they tell me all the time, we didn't do all this for you not to pay it forward for another kid. And, you know, I have lifelong accountability with those people. So I want to encourage you to understand that just because a kid is in a bad situation right then, that doesn't mean that they don't dream big, that they don't want to work hard, and that they don't want to stop that cycle. So as a teacher, you've got to believe in your kids. You got to fight for them. And most importantly, you got to love them in the right way. So going into what we're talking about as far as our current school population, Anston Middle School is an urban middle school. It's middle to low class socioeconomically. I have 98% African American students, 1% white, 1% other ethnicities. We have Protestant, Hindu, Muslims, and Catholics. 60% female, 40% male. 18% of our kids are special ed, full IEP special ed. 24% of our kids are diagnosed with ADHD, and we have 10% ELL students. So talking about America's class structure, there is the upper class, which is over $250,000 a year, middle class, which can range from $250,000 down to $40,000 a year, and poverty. And class is based off of economics, political, cultural, and social resources, and there is just a broad spectrum as to where you can land at any given moment. So the upper class, it's inherited wealth. They're top level administrators. That's the only two ends of it there is, really. Most of them are Protestant. They marry within their class. They're well educated, whether they went to college or not. They've had more resources than anyone else to be educated, and they're a very homogeneous group. And then there's the middle class. And the middle class is probably the most diverse group that we have in America. You have your upper middle class, the middle of the middle class, which is absurd, and then the lower middle class, because to be the upper middle class, you've got to make between $180,000 and $250,000 a year. To be middle class, you're making between $80,000 to $110,000 a year. And the lower middle class, it's $40,000 to $80,000 a year. Most of these people are the professionals to work, service workers. Everybody is represented. And the thing is that with this, there's three different lifestyles. We've got the top 5%, then the middle class, which is 55% of it all, and then the lower middle class, which is actually 40%. And last, we have the poverty class. These people, this class experiences periods of unemployment. They're socially isolated. They lack good housing. They might be suffering from situational poverty, like my mother and I experienced from domestic violence, divorce, or job loss. And since Katrina happened, we now have the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which can help our students who are in poverty.
So when Chris began our presentation today, he went over our objectives. And the first objective that he talked about was being able to define what socioeconomic status is. So when we talk about socioeconomic status, we're talking about a combination of economic and sociological status of a family or an individual. And it's based on income, an individual or family's wealth, their occupation, and their educational attainment.
So talking about income, that is how much money we're making in a year. And there's actually a very large variance in that. You have everything from professionals and minimum wage. It sets a life limits on your lifestyle, whether you can have vacations or items of status, you know, whether you're going to be wearing polo or whether you're going to be wearing, you know, something faded glory from Walmart. Savings versus living paycheck to paycheck. True wealth versus just making it. And the loss of income can result in homelessness and other hardships.
So when we talk about socioeconomic status, one of the factors we talked about was income. And those that are considered wealthy usually have things like savings accounts, they have insurance, they might have corporate stock ownership and own property. And then because they have wealth, they're provided with future income and the possibility to produce even more wealth from that. So one of the three factors that determines a person's socioeconomic status is their occupation. A person's occupation determines their income. And there's two types of occupations that we're looking at, white collar and blue collar workers. And a person's occupation really determines their social interactions. People that are surrounded by professionals all day most likely dress and converse differently than people that work in a labor position. Another factor that we've talked about that determines a person's socioeconomic status is their level of education. And typically people that attain more education have higher paying jobs. However, there are some discrepancies in wages based on sex because traditionally women make less than men when they are in the same position. And the chart that we have here compares the income of men and women with and without a degree. And you can see on the chart that without a high school diploma, males make on average about $8,000 more than females. And then at the end of the chart, you can see that with a bachelor's degree, men make on average about $21,000 more than women.
Right now, we're going to talk about the socioeconomic status circle of power. So the upper level incomes and the upper level status is what drives it to keep going. They're who actually drives the national state politics. Their education for their kids is not exempt. They are always pushing for better schools for their kids and the best teachers. They push their kids to have advanced classes. And it just continues this little circle. And because they influence so much in America, it really leaves out the lower socioeconomic class. As you'll see in this little graphic right here to the bottom, that's why I put it on the outside of the circle, because it really kind of gives you an idea of they are not in that circle of power. they have very little control. They have the lower share of society's benefits.
So, what are we trying to say based on what Molly and Krista have touched on? We're talking about economic inequality. Economic inequality is an imbalance between socioeconomic classes and the opportunities provided for them based on their income. The United States has the fourth highest inequality rate in the world behind Chile, Mexico, and Turkey. In 2013, 14.5% of the population in the United States was living in poverty. That's over 45 million people in the U.S. were living in poverty. Social policies, such as the minimum wage, blocks lower economic status people from having better opportunities. For example, lower minimum wage workers in America make less than lower minimum wage workers around the country. The majority of people that make up the poverty population are young people other than Caucasians, women, and minimum wage workers.
So we're going to talk right now about teaching for equality. And it's important that we as teachers provide an equal education for all of our students. So the question we're asking is, what can teachers and school leaders do to ensure a quality educational experience for all of our learners? And the first thing that teachers can do is provide a high level of instruction for all students. Encourage student discourse, which would be discussions between students. Another thing teachers and school systems can do is to provide accurate curriculum. One example would be most of the curriculum that we use right now really highlights heroes from our country that are typically white males. And instead of discussing laborers, people that endured under great odds and to improve their working conditions, that's not really talked about in our curriculum right now. Next, teachers need to recognize the value of informal education that our students bring to school. It's important that we show students that we value the knowledge that they have. It's also important that students see their own cultures reflected in our curriculum. And that could mean working class people, maybe people from other ethnicities, other religions. And we really need to take the time to discuss those differences with our students when we see that in our curriculum. And finally, teachers should help students and encourage students to develop strong and positive self-concepts. Encourage and support the differences among all of our students. Okay, so today we've talked a little bit about socioeconomic status and class, and now we're going to look at how that impacts our students at school. And you can look at the equation here, and it shows that low reading skills combined with low math skills and high absenteeism equals a lower academic performance from our students. And we know that these are characteristics of students from low socioeconomic families with the low reading skills and the high absentee rates. And then the chart below kind of supports what we were just talking about. It shows you that 45% of students who qualify for free or reduced lunch scored below a basic level on achievement test, while only about 15% of students that don't qualify for free or reduced lunch scored basic. So that's a difference of about 30% of our students. So here we've provided some examples of inequalities people face due to their socioeconomic status. African Americans, Hispanics, and people from low socioeconomic statuses have lower graduation rates. They have lower incomes, earning less money. And then we also talk about gender inequality. And we touched on this earlier, saying that women typically make less, even in the same positions as men.
Now we're going to move into how socioeconomic class can cause concerns for the classroom. Students from low-income families typically take fewer courses in math and science, and that contributes later on when they're looking at college enrollment and vocational choices. And in many schools with large numbers of low-income students, advanced courses may be offered, but they lack the academic rigor of the more advantaged schools. When you're looking at teacher expectations, many teachers don't expect the students who are in the lower academic group at the beginning of the year to perform at high levels by the end of the year. They go ahead and deem them as less successful students. And when teachers make judgments like that about students, they're really taking the first step in preventing those students from having an equal opportunity for academic achievement. Teachers, counselors, and administrators can kind of unconsciously fall into this behavior because they've been taught that poverty is the fault of the individual. And as a result, students are blamed for circumstances that are really beyond their control. Many teachers blame the students, their families, and the communities for the students' failure to learn, rather than taking a look at themselves and their own teaching practices and trying to improve student learning. Now we're going to look at a plan of action for the classroom. The thought that poverty is the fault of the individual results in students being blamed for circumstances that are beyond their control. And instead, educators should really see this as an opportunity to provide these students with the knowledge and the skills to overcome poverty. Educators should select approaches that they would use for even the most gifted students, and the goal should be to improve the educational experiences for those students who previously would have been tracked into a lower ability class. Students' feelings of low self-esteem should not be reinforced by teachers. Seeing students as individuals rather than as members of a specific economic group may also help educators in overcoming the classism that exists in schools and communities. And information about a student's family background could be used in understanding the power of the environment of a student's expression of themselves. Educators should also become aware of any prejudices that they themselves hold against members of lower socioeconomic groups and work to overcome those biases. These are some educational strategies for the classroom. For many students, schools are a safe place compared to the daily lives that they live in their neighborhoods that are characterized by poverty. And although it's essential that we teach the subject matter, how these skills are taught should really depend on the environment that the students live in. The curriculum needs to be both engaging and meaningful to students by recognizing and building on their life experiences and helping students achieve academically in schools that serve students from low-income families really requires competent educators who fully understand the subjects that they're teaching and who also believe that their students can learn. The curriculum should reflect the class structure and the inequities that exist in the United States. Many times, textbooks focus on the values and experiences of a middle-class society. They highlight the heroes of our political system who were primarily white males from economically privileged families, and they usually ignore the history and the heroes of the labor struggle of this country. They don't usually discuss the role of working class in the development of our nation. And in classrooms, students should really learn of the existence of these differences and should understand that the majority of the population does not live in this middle class myth. Oftentimes, we overlook the experiences that students bring to the classroom. Students need to see their own culture represented in the curriculum, and they need to see ordinary people depicted as valued members of society. Students should be encouraged to look critically at what they read, see, and hear in textbooks, what they see on social media, and from what they hear from their parents and friends. Our curriculum should encourage the development of true critical thinking. When we're addressing concerns with administration, it's important that we go to the administration when the concerns arise and not let them get too far gone. We need to go to our administration with a plan of action in mind, suggestions for how we think we should solve the problem. Then we need to be open to their feedback and suggestions. And we also need to make sure that we follow up with administration and keep them in the know about what's going on with the situation.
So, well, how do we talk to parents about situations with kids? Well, we need to make sure that we're always speaking clearly and effectively, even if that means that we're going to get an interpreter or someone to help us communicate clearly with someone who speaks a different language than us. We always need to begin with positive traits and qualities, but we also need to be firm about what our academic expectations are for that student and what we're expecting in our classroom. And we also need to be resourceful to help the parent understand technology. Not everyone is in a middle class situation, and therefore they don't understand, how to use technology. Maybe they haven't seen it. So we need to make sure that parents understand Google Classroom, iExcel, MobyMax, and Stride. And we need to goal set with the parent to help them make sure that they are seeing what their student needs to know and seeing what the expectations are. So some networking solutions that you always need to have on hand as a teacher. We're blessed at Anderson City Schools. We have a parent specialist, but if you don't have that, I would suggest that you make sure that you have someone that you can help refer parents to. Always offer to maybe speak with a counselor with the parent, maybe to address, home concerns, attitude and behavior concerns, and academics. Always check with your McKinney-Vento liaison that's within your school system. If there's ever a child who is in a situation of homelessness or need, there is grants available with that, so that we can always make sure the kids are being taken care of. And then we need to always have like a list of referrals for community organizations. Sometimes parents are new to the area, and families are, or maybe they're embarrassed, but they don't know who to reach out to. So just like kids find school as a safe zone, parents do too. And so because they have grown up where school was a place to go for information, they will come to you at some point in time. Some parents will, asking for information on how to get connected in their community to help or to be helped. And then one thing that we always have to remember as teachers is that we're there not only to lend a hand to the student academically, but we're there to lend a hand to the student socially. And we're always there to help, and we always need to have a heart for our kids.
So this concludes our professional development presentation for today. We hope, it is our goal and our hope that you leave here with tools for success to combat these inequalities we've discussed today. Not only to combat them, but we hope you leave here truly inspired to help those students that truly need your help. To sum up what we've learned, socioeconomic status is where an individuals fall in the hierarchy of the world based on wealth, education, and their livelihood. Unfortunately, there's forms of inequality today that still affects the classroom environment, such as race, gender, and economic status. There are, however, many learning implications as well as teaching strategies to address this issue. No student or human being, for that matter, deserves to be left alone or left out based on where they fall on the socioeconomic scale of the world. Before you leave today, please take a moment to reflect on today's professional development and write down 3 things that you've learned, 2 things that you still have questions about, questions or concerns, and 1 thing we can improve on for next time. Please leave your comments in the basket on the desk. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.